Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. During the 1990s and very early 2000s, Turkey was Israel's closest non-Arab strategic partner in the Middle East. But with the rise of Erdogan to power in Ankara, the Turkish-Israeli relationship has now deteriorated to the point of open hostility. Since Erdogan has been exerting his influence over the new Damascus regime, armed clashes between Turkey and Israel over developments in Syria are now not unthinkable. Could we really be on a path towards combat between the IDF and the Turkish armed forces? Let's turn to our panel to find out more about this topic. I'd like to say shalom to Professor Russell Berman, formerly senior advisor in the U.S. State Department and director of the Middle East Project at Hoover Institute. Welcome.
Thank you.
Retired Colonel Dr. Oren, Powers in Play panelist, JISS Vice President and lecturer at Shalom College. Shalom.
Right.
And
Shalom.
last but not least, Mr. Amir Oren, TV7's editor-at-large. Please set the stage for this discussion. It seems like a very high bar to say that we will reach that point. Is it really so?
So Erdogan obviously has his domestic agenda, which is anti-Israeli, also his regional and strategic agenda, and it ties in nicely or not so nicely. And as of late, he has escalated his war of words and perhaps also cutting off trade relations, even though one of his ministers later said that the declarations only reflected the reality, did not precede any new measures. But obviously, the Netanyahu government has been at odds with the Erdogan regime for the last 16 years almost. In 2010, we had the Mavi Marmara incident, the flotilla which tried to break the quarantine over Gaza. Then later, there was some warming of relations, especially when the Bennett-Lapid government took over from Netanyahu for a year and a half. There was some effort. Some feelers were sent by both the intelligence agency, MIT, and the foreign ministry. But again, there was a chilling effect, especially once Hamas, which was a sort of a ward of the Turks, the Erdogan specifically, the AK party, they are in cahoots with the Muslim Brotherhood, Qatar, and Hamas. This is the sort of their axis in the Middle East, the radical Sunni axis. And right now, especially since Israel is no longer part of EUCOM, the European Command, and Turkey cannot really hamper Israeli relations with NATO, which is co-located with EUCOM, Erdogan is quite frustrated.
Professor Berman, I'll ask a blunt question. So the rhetoric is extreme. So what? What influence does this really have? And again, we set the premise here as if we may be going to a physical clash. Most of us will think that's impossible. So what could be this rhetoric? Where could it lead to?
Well, of course, nothing is impossible, and smart people in the Israeli leadership would be planning for every contingency. But I agree with you that a direct clash is unlikely. As has already been pointed out, Erdogan has a number of agendas. He has a domestic agenda. He wants to mobilize anti-Israel sentiment. There really is the prospect of interest conflict in Syria, which remains an ambiguous territory at this point. No one knows which direction al-Shara is going to go. But I guess that the primary driver of this accelerated exacerbation of rhetoric on the part of Erdogan has to do with another agenda as well, and that has to do with his regional aspirations, as Iran is fading from leadership in the region, not gone, but fading. The issue now is going to be Turkey versus Saudi. Who's the big player on the block? And Erdogan is promoting himself as the leader in the new axis of resistance, so to speak, an axis that is Ankara and Qatar.
Dr. Berman, can you maybe talk about how you see Erdogan's ambitions? Is it really going so far as the new Ottoman Empire, or is it more the Muslim Brotherhood ideology here? Where do you think he really aspires to?
There's clearly a neo-Ottoman streak in Erdogan's policy, symbolized by acts like the retrieval of the Hagia Sophia as a mosque and the declarations that attended it. Many symbolic aspects of his era of governance is systematically undoing the Kemalist tradition in many respects, including the injunction that Mustafa Kemal Atatürk basically inculcated in the military, that they should not have any further ambitions beyond the territorial unity of Turkey as it came to be after the victory over the Greeks in the 20s. Erdogan is pushing the limits in the Aegean. He has drawn a highly paradoxical line of the EEZ in the diagonal direction across the Mediterranean in a way that would block Israel, Cyprus, and Egypt from having a direct connection with the European space. And he intervenes in conflicts across the region in a manner that is definitely indicative of ambitions well above those of Turkey under the Kemalist tradition. Having said all this, there is a qualifier here, which is that the Turkish economy is quite dependent on its international standing. It has shown significant vulnerabilities in the last 2 decades. This was at the core of his active courtship of the Saudis and the Emiratis after years of tension and conflict. Of course, he's married to the Qataris, but he nevertheless tried to court also Saudi Arabia and the Emiratis in order to bring investment into the Turkish economy. And interestingly, that coincided with his efforts to bury the hatchet with the Egyptians and even with Israel. You remember the relatively pleasant visit that was accorded to our president, a symbolic figure, truly not a political leader, but nevertheless a symbol of an attempt by Erdogan before the war to include Israel, ironically, because the Israeli relations with the Gulf were such that you court the Gulf key players without reducing the level of tensions with Israel. All of this, of course, changed after the 7th of October. His basic gut commitment to Hamas, to the Qatari position, and to the Muslim Brotherhood in general resurfaced. And right now, as was said here, the battleground is in Syria. Recently there was an Israeli raid on a target inside Syria, which reportedly involved the removal of Turkish monitoring capabilities. That's as close to conflict as we ever came. However, and that's the last point here at this stage, we also have we have a mitigating mechanism. We have, paradoxically, a friend in common with the Turks, namely Azerbaijan, which has celebrated its victories over Armenia by raising the Israeli and Turkish flags side by side, because we've both been helpful to the Azeris for very different reasons, obviously. And the Azeris are there to help us talk to the Turks and contain and mitigate the impact of our tensions over Syria. And I think this is a mechanism that will continue to be there.
You just demonstrate how broad and complex this issue is.
It's very complex because just following on what Iran said, only a few days ago and many decades later, Prime Minister Netanyahu recognized the massacre of the Armenians by the Turks more than 100 years ago. And if the Azeris bordering Iran, of course, one quarter of Iranians are of Azeri extraction. Yes. But if Azerbaijan is an important ally of Israel, overlooking Iran, and Azerbaijan is a rival of Armenia, even though Trump said that he ended the war there, what does that make Israel vis-a-vis Turkey?
Before my next question, just a comment. What I said so far, you may think that I'm not concerned, or I think we'll never get to hostilities. I'm very concerned, worried, and even sad, because I think Turkey should be a very important partner of Israel. I know the people. I flew there. I like the Turkish people, and I think there's a lot to lose from this clash. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Oren.
By the way, many people who may physically be like us would be very concerned if the relationship is being cut because they go to Istanbul for hair transplants.
Of course. Mr. Oren, it seems like world politics and world power plays are very personal now. Just think, we're talking names, Putin, Trump. How much is this Erdogan himself? And one day, when he's no longer in the leadership of Turkey, are we back on track to partnership?
It's very much personal. And remember, in late 2002, when he took over, yes, he's been in power for almost 23 years. He's junior only to Putin, who came in the year 2000, being prime minister and then president. He forced the United States of America to change its war plans vis-a-vis Saddam Hussein's Iraq. The Northern Maneuver, an entire U.S. Army Corps was supposed to penetrate Iraq from the Turkish side, and he barred it. It's all Erdogan.
Professor Berman, it only makes sense that I will ask you about the United States. Please unpack this for us. It must be very strange, confusing for the United States having two important partners like Israel and Turkey, NATO ally. What happens when we go down that path? What does the United States do? Can it de-escalate? Can it tell the Turks, cut it out?
Listen, politics often makes strange bedfellows, as this would be a job for Dept diplomacy to try to mitigate this divergence between two partners, two allies, Israel and Turkey. Having said that, Turkey has been a difficult partner for the United States for quite some time, and Turkey has a lot to lose in terms of support, not just from the administration, where President Trump has claimed to have a good relationship personally with Erdogan, but also in Congress. And that has been consistently a problem for Turkey. So Turkey should be worrying about that. If I can pick up on the point that you were making just a moment ago, a lot of this is personal, and I think that's interesting. There was a time when people dismissed the notion of the role of the individual in history or in politics, and now we're seeing that personalities really do make a difference. I see this as a particular historical moment, a certain so-called rules-based order that prevailed really since the Second World War, and then especially since 1989 and the collapse of communism in Europe, has run its course. It's no longer working. Maybe there'll be a new rules-based order in the future. I don't think anything disappears forever. But right now, personalities in politics really make a big difference.
Yeah, interesting, because this also alludes to another issue that we won't be able to get in today, and that's the Chinese perspective here and the comments coming out of them. They lay a very clear strategy of how they see the world moving forward. There was just a meeting involving Turkish delegation too. So, but again, we won't have time to get into that. Dr. Lerman, maybe I should say Colonel retired Lerman, because I wanted to ask you, and again, I feel uncomfortable to talk about direct military confrontation, but still, we are used to fighting terrorists, guerrilla warfare, and types of rivals in this multidimensional war. But fighting a Western army, flying F-16s, how would the IDF perceive that and address that?
No, well, the IDF is certainly not prepared for war with anything of the magnitude of the Turkish military, the second largest military in NATO. And hopefully we should never come to that point. The Navy is it is beyond comparison with our very limited, talented and daring but limited capabilities. In the air, we have, I believe, points of superiority. F-35s have been denied to the Turks because of their complicated air defense relationship with the Russians. But certainly their ground forces are immense, and we should certainly hope we should never come to blows. I don't think the Turkish military is in any way institutionally eager to test itself against Israel and vice versa. And so if there's ever to be a conflictual relationship, it will be more in the nature of our proxies beating up their proxies in Syria with some limited degree of direct involvement. We saw this game being played by the Turks in Libya, and that could be the nature of what happens again. We have to concede that Turkey has a very advanced military industry. Their drones are among the best. The Bayraktars have been a significant contribution to the ability of the regime in Western Libya to survive the assault by Haftar from the east. And so on. So I think whatever effort we can invest via the Azeris, through American pressure, through an indication of the economic consequences for Turkey by some of our friends in the region, whatever we can do to avoid coming to that kind of test, we should do.
Absolutely.
Reuven, please indulge my inability to resist. But did you notice that what we have today is the Berman and Lerman show?
Absolutely.
You did.
I was holding back.
Okay, very good. Now, you flew in Turkey, as you said. The Israeli Air Force deployed there. One reason was that every Israeli Air Force pilot knows Israel and the vicinity too well to be surprised by any new maneuvers or terrain. But after Turkey stopped hosting you and your colleagues, Greece did and does, and Cyprus. And the Israeli Commando Brigade, for instance, deployed more than once to Cyprus and found forests and mountains to training. Obviously, the Turks took note of the strategic alliance in the Eastern Mediterranean between Israel and two of their, not really friends, adversaries, if not enemies.
So I had a question for you, but you blew it.
Okay.
So I'm going to pass it on to Professor Berman. Professor Berman, what Mr. Oren just addressed now, this regional aspect, how do you think our partners in the Middle East see it, in the Mediterranean area? And how do you think they will react if, God forbid, we reach this kind of clash or a missed opportunity that leads to conflict?
Listen, I think the Saudis are ultimately concerned about Turkey and along the Ankara Qatar axis. Your allies in the region are of course, not at all opposed to the regional integration of Israel and Greece and Cyprus. That's a big opportunity for Egypt as well. I think the interesting new variable is what is going to be the consequence of the Armenia-Azerbaijan rapprochement. This is going to open up opportunities for pipelines going into Central Asia, opportunities for Turkey as well. And this could put Turkey more at odds both with Russia and with Iran. I spoke about Dept diplomacy before as a mission for the United States to try to solve some of this problem, and part of the answer could be to try to redirect this Turkish ambition toward the east and away from the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Berman, the Turks just came out now with a declaration they're severing all ties with Israel. They even said no flights going over. Then they said they didn't mean commercial flights. How do you think the impact is really going to be now? Till now we talked strategically long-term, but now the impact on economy, flights, etc., how do you think this is going to unfold?
Well, it's interesting that they clarified quite quickly that they did not intend to block Israeli flights. And that's because I believe that this would have done more general damage to Turkey's ambition to become a global air transport hub. And of course, our capability to retaliate is very limited. But it would have had consequences, and interestingly, they did walk back that particular dog, which is, I think, indicative. Had they gone through with it, it would have been quite problematic. It's very difficult to fly to Asia, parts of Asia at least, without going over Turkish territory, given that Iran is stuck in the middle. But and many of the flights to Europe nowadays go over Turkey. That's more manageable. You can go through Greece. But in any case, we should certainly, let's say, look at every lever that we can have on this question. And we are not without friends in America in this respect, specifically. Our the Greek alignment is not just a question of the Eastern Mediterranean. It extends to Washington as well. And the Israeli and Greek interests now, when they converge, are sufficient to have an impact on Turkish interests in Congress. So all of this, I think, again, can act to mitigate some of the more aggressive tendencies that from time to time bubble up in Ankara.
Mm-hmm.
May I comment on...
I'm used to it that you don't let me ask you questions. That's okay.
Well, and I didn't really wait for permission, but I'm very polite. It's very ironic, the turn of events which Iran just referred to, because having been marginally involved in the Israeli relationship with Congress many years ago, it was the other way around. The Greeks had a very powerful lobby in Congress. Several senators and congressmen of Greek extraction in key spots. A vice president, Agnew, at one time, but others, Sabins and Tsongas and several others. And Turkey turned to Israel for balance. Now, I'm mentioning it because the other day, President Trump had an interview with an outlet called the Daily Caller. And all of a sudden, without any question to prompt it, he mourned the decline of the Israeli lobby on Capitol Hill for the last 20 years. Israel can no longer open doors for other countries against the administration's wishes, cannot play Congress against the administration the way it used this card for Turkey's benefit.
Mm-hmm. We have approximately 2 minutes left. Professor Berman, I want to leave the stage for you. On a broader scale, how do you see this turning of Turkey from a partner of Israel to a rival? How does it tie into the other aspects of the Middle East, this war, the axis that Iran leads? I don't want to lead you with a direct question. How do you perceive this and where it's going?
Well, one way to see this is just a continuation of the exacerbation of Erdogan's anti-Israel rhetoric that's been going on for some while, and one shouldn't underestimate the importance of this for domestic politics. We were just talking about the reversal of the announcement about Israel flying through Turkish airspace. The correction was, oh, this does not apply to commercial. Well, how much military overflight was there really? So was this just a kind of domestic propaganda balloon that was then clarified for the benefit of all sides after that? Erdogan as a domestic politician is one aspect. Another is, as I said earlier, about his competition with Saudi for domination in the region. And in the end, I see that this, like so much else, will be resolved once the Gaza conflict is pacified. This is a momentary phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. I think we just touched on some of the issues. There are complexities to further analyze. For instance, the real impact on Syria. Like, what does Turkey really want to do on the ground in Syria that is so troubling for Israel? Dr. Lerman mentioned these systems that maybe Israel took out. And the last thing, maybe you'll allow me to give a word of advice, not to the politicians, but to the militaries. And that is, get together, engage, work out protocols, and deconflict. We did that with Russia in Syria. You don't have to be the best friends. Your strategic interests don't have to be aligned. You have to know how to fly very carefully, not bump into each other, not lead, God forbid, to a miscalculation, because that would be a tragedy for everybody. Sorry for the speech, but this is close to my heart. I would like to thank our panelists here, Mr. Oren, Professor Berman, and Dr. Lerman, and also thank our viewers at home. Thank you for being with us today. See you next time, and Shalom from Jerusalem.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.